In this video you will learn how to make tech house, and for that I made this song. All we do is dance and fight. So before we actually start making music, we need to understand what tech house is and what elements are in the general tech house song. My name is Matt Flank. Let's get started. To make tech house, you need to keep in the back of your head that tech house is made for DJing and mixing. So some things that are very important are a continuous beat, and it is easy to DJ or mix. Some of the most important elements of tech house are drums and a bass line and a vocal sample that is easily recognizable. Let's make a quick list of all the elements we need. So for tech house we need the drums. We need a bass line, and we will expand on this in a little bit. We need a vocal sample, and sometimes there's also a synthesizer. So for the drums we need a kick that is sometimes distorted. It needs to be a very thick kick. Next up, there is a short clap or snare. Then we have an offbeat hi-hat. An offbeat open hi-hat, should I say. And then there is a second hi-hat or a shaker or a tambourine that is used for accents. And then there is also percussion used, but that is not always the case, so I'm gonna put that in brackets. Next up, let's talk about the bass line. So it's very important that the bass line of a tech house song is minimal. What's also important is that it is bouncy. But you have to be careful not to overdo it, or it can easily start to become a future bounce song. Which is also really nice, but if you're going for tech house you want to keep it minimal and also keep the bounce minimal. So in the drums there is always this 4 to the floor kick pattern. And to explain what I mean with bouncy, I mean that the bass line has to dance around the kick. So often it will have a couple notes on the kick and then a couple notes off the kick to kind of bounce around a little bit. It will make sense in a second. Next up, for the vocal sample, we have one word or phrase, but it can also be a short lyric, but you want to keep it very short and easily recognizable. When I'm writing tech house and I'm using more than one word or phrase as the lyrics, I want to make sure that there is a single word or phrase that is the main focus of the vocals, and then you can write lyrics around that. So in one of my latest songs that I have been working on, all the people is the main phrase. In this song that we will be listening to in a second, the main phrase is dance and fight. And then finally, if we have a synthesizer that is added sometimes, we can do some chords in the buildup. So let's write that down. Buildup, and they can continue into the drop, or we can actually do a melody. But if you're doing a melody, the song starts to move away a little bit from tech house. The main focus needs to be the drums and the bass line to get people in the groove, to get people dancing in the club. So by adding an actual melody, you're going to take away from that element and you're gonna make the song the main focus rather than the beat. And that is why in this case I'll be showing you two examples of the song that I made. I've made the same song but with two different drops. One has a melody and one doesn't, so you can hear the difference of the vibe. So if I were to play this song live and I had a version with the melody, I would play that a little bit later in the evening when the groove is already going, people are already partying, and I don't need to warm up anymore. But if people are still coming to the party, they are still joining, they're not really in the mood yet, you can play the version, or you can try to play songs that are less melody focused. So keep that in mind when you are making a song, what the purpose of the song is. And then finally, before we actually jump in how I made the song, I want to talk about the structure. Everything in tech house is pretty much based around 4, 8 or 16 bar loops. I'm gonna write those things down as well. And if you want to have what I've written down here, or if you want to take a look at it later, you can go to my website mattflank.com, and everything is written there as well. And what's very important is that we have an intro. We want this intro to be 8 or 16 bars, and that is gonna make it easier for the DJ to mix the song in with other songs. If you've DJ'd, you know this very well, that this is a common thing to do, and if you haven't and you are at the club next time, try to pay attention to it maybe. So then we need a build-up, and a build-up can start right after the intro Sometimes the build-up is the last 8 bars of the intro, but if you have more lyrics written, it can also be that the build-up starts after the verse, but not all tech house songs have a verse. Next up we have the drop, which is pretty straightforward. Usually it takes elements from the build-up, like the bass line and the drum groove, and is just simply that with some risers, some white noise effects, but we will take a look at that in a second. Okay, so now that we know all the elements we need to make a tech house song, I'm going to show you how I made the song that I showed you in the beginning. And for this song I have 2 drops. One of the drops is a little bit more future house-ish, but it is a style that I really like. And the cool thing about music is that you have the freedom to do whatever you want. But to also stick to the tutorial of how to make tech house, I have a different drop that I would make if I were to strictly make tech house. So we will take a look at that first, and then I will show you how I made my twist of the song. All we do is dance and fight. So when I'm making tech house, I like to start with a drum loop. Okay, so in the drum loop we have a couple of sounds. The most important one being the kick, the snare and the hi-hat. So the kick is simply a 4 to the floor pattern, this is the kick. Then I have a clap and a snare which are layered. It's actually 3 different sounds. So we have this one is layered as well, to get a nice coherent clap sound. Then we have an open hi-hat on the offbeat. This is the open hi-hat. Every 4 bars it is layered with these 2, to make it sound like this. If I take those 2 away, it's a small difference, but it adds to the overall groove of making it sound less repetitive. Every 2 bars there is those quick hi-hats. And then I have 2 percussion hits, this one and this one. So now that we have a drum loop, then I like to make a bass line. And for the bass line, when I'm making tech house, I like to use Serum, and I actually have a preset pack for Serum, the Tech House Bass Essentials. And when using that pack, you can simply take a preset and start writing bass lines straight away because they sound good out of the box. This is what one of the presets sounds like, and this is also the bass line that I wrote. This bassline is already on the less minimal side because there is a lot going on, but I have a simplified version of it that I also play. And you can hear, if you combine it with the drum loop, how it bounces around and plays with the kick. So the bass line is in F minor, this entire song is in F minor. You can see I pretty much use only 3 notes for the standard bass pattern, an F, a C and an A sharp or a B flat. And that's the only notes that are used except for this E flat that is also in the end for a little bit of variation. And that's a common thing you're gonna see with tech house bass lines. They often have 3 or 4 notes that are very repetitive, very easy to remember, very easy to dance to, which is the whole point. I then have this bass line layered with a Reese bass to make it sound a little bit more full, and then a sub bass for the low frequencies. But this is simply for the subwoofer in the club. So then we have the brass stab. Let's take a listen. So these are 3 layers. One, we have the brass itself, which is an Ableton instrument, orchestral brass from Ableton. It sounds like this. Then this Reese bass, it's also from my Tech House bass preset pack, because this is a very common sound, and in that pack I have pretty much all the common bass sounds that you would ever need if you're making Tech House. It sounds like this. This is straight out of the pack, no processing added to it at all. And then I have this other Reese, which has a utility and an LFO. And this LFO is automating the volume of the utility and also the filter cutoff frequency to make it wobble. This adds to the overall groove and makes it sound a little bit more interesting. as you can hear. Before we take a look at the effects that I added, let's quickly take a look at the piano. This is also a common element in house, a little bit less in tech house, but I like to implement it as well to add some harmony. You could also use a synthesizer for this, but in this case I use the piano. So the piano I use is Addictive Keys, and it's a preset called House Keys. On its own, without any processing, it sounds like this. Then I added an EQ to boost some of the high frequencies, an OTT, reverb, and then a sidechain compressor. So then before the effects we also have something very important, which is the vocal sample. And I recorded 2 vocal layers, the first one being this one. Every day we smoke in the morning, every day we drink at night, going to the club to party, all we do is dance and fight. And I did the same thing, but I sang it 1 octave higher. Every day we smoke in the morning, as you can hear. And then I have 2 more layers, but let's take a look at those. So as you can see, both of them contain Little Alter Boy. So they are both the high octave vocal sample, but this one is pitched down an entire octave to make it sound a little bit raspy. Every day we smoke in the morning. And then this one is also the high octave one, but then with the formants turned down 1 octave. Altogether, with a little bit of panning, it sounds like this. Every day we smoke in the morning, every day we drink at night. And then I also have autotune, some reverb, some EQ, some delay to make it sound more full. Without any processing, it sounds like this. Every day we smoke in the morning. And then with. Every day we smoke in the morning. You can hear the difference. So finally some of the effects. And this is something I didn't realize how important it was until I actually started studying some tech house songs. So I have been listening to a lot of tech house and been looking up some of the history of the genre. And I realized that more often than not, they use more white noise effects than you think they use. When you're in a club or when you're just casually listening to some tech house, you don't notice it. But when you start to compare it and you start to look at the EQs and the spectrum meters, you can really see how much white noise is actually in the song and how much high frequencies. So if you're making tech house and your song sounds a bit empty, there is a very good chance that the lack of white noise and effects like this are the reason why it sounds empty. I'm going to play you the last part of the build-up and the first part of the drop with and without the effects, and you can tell the difference for yourself. This is without. All we do is dance and fight. And now with. All we do is dance and fight. So I have 4 different layers, the first one being a white noise splash. We have a riser as well. Then we have this continuous white noise. And then we have this riser. So then for the alternate drop, what I just showed you was the purely tech house version, but I like to spice up my drops a little bit by adding a melody, by adding a little bit more bounce. I would still call it tech house, but it's more with some influence from future bounce and future house. So I added this lead. I'm gonna tell you how I made it in a second. So what I like to do is in the build-up, I like to introduce the melody of the drop. That way, when it actually is time to play the drop, it doesn't sound weird and your ears are already used to hearing a melody and hearing a synthesizer. So I have this melody that I just played you and then a simplified version in the build-up with some filtering. And you can see I have done a lot of automation. This is the reverb automation, the reverb mix, this is the reverb decay time, this is the auto filter frequency, and then I have some gain as well, but that is not really important. So this lead is very straightforward. It's a serum preset. I think it is actually a stock serum preset. Let's take a look at it. So we can see we have 2 saw waves, and one I have detuned a little bit. That's what the preset sounds like. On there we have some delay and reverb. Then I have Coffee Pun, which is an equalizer. It is in my best plugins of 2021 video. Then I also have some multiband EQ, some multiband compression going on, and some more reverb. And with the melody, it sounds like this. All we do is dance and fight. And you can hear I also add some of the vocal samples throughout the build-up and throughout the drop to fill it up even more. So now that you know how to make a drop, I want to finalize this video by showing you how to make an intro and a build-up. So when it comes to the intro, you want to add 8 or 16 bars of the drum loop, and you can add some melodic or harmonic elements to it, but not too much, because it needs to be easy for the DJ to fade it in when he is fading out another song. So for this I used a simplified version of my drum loop. I added a simplified version of the bass line. With a filter, and then in the second part of the intro I added the vocal sample. As you can hear. So that way the DJ has time to fade in the song, and he can also loop those 8 bars because they are very loopable. So not all tech house songs have a verse, as I told you, but I chose to add a verse for this one, since there is more lyrics than just one simple word or line. And then we get to the build-up. The most important things are filtering and the snare and the drums. As you can hear, the snare starts to loop. And listen to the filter as well. And the reverb. And if you then also use an auto filter or a filter on the vocals, on the bass line I did the same thing by filtering out some of the low frequencies. So then when the drop starts to play and all of a sudden there is a lot of low frequencies, it's gonna punch even harder. And then the riser is there to finalize everything. So that is pretty much how to make tech house. It's not that difficult, but you need to write tools for it. And one of the most useful tools that I have is my own preset pack, Tech House Serum Bass Essentials for Serum. It's a pack that contains 7 Tech House bass presets that you absolutely need and that are used in pretty much every Tech House song on Spotify, on YouTube, everywhere. If you want to make better music and if you want to support me, please take a look at the pack and consider buying it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for supporting me. My name is Matt Flank. Peace out.